Now that I begin, let me start formally by telling you that my talk is titled Network is Your Net Worth. This is something that my grandfather told me very early in life, saying, Rishabh, your network is going to be your net worth. I didn't understand much what this statement meant, and till date I'm trying to figure out what it means. But I must tell you something that I've realized over the last few years of my life. That the world, unfortunately or fortunately, is controlled by a few people. That the top 1% of the world control about 40% of the wealth. That as of 2022, 6 out of the 27 judges of the Supreme Court are also people who come from lineage. It's no surprise that, the Johars and the Chopras yet take charge of everything that happens in Bollywood and in cinema. It's very few people, essentially, that control what is happening across the world. Even in the field of politics, in our country, there are only about 34 political families that control the fortune of the rest of the country. Now, this basically translates for me as that the top 1% of the country somehow seem to control everything that is happening in the world. But the issue is that many of us, including me, don't necessarily come from the top 1%. And it's the 1% that decide how the game is played. You could be R. Pragnananda or you could be Magnus Carlsen. But at the end of the day, you are simply pawns on the chessboard. It's very few who actually play the game. So in order to stand out, in order to be the person whose network will translate into your net worth, it's very important in order to understand how to break through these people. In the last 12 years, the organization that I run, called I.I.M.U.N, and I must say this, that I run it less and young people run it more, all of these people have tried to reach out to the top 1% of the country and the world. And they somehow have managed to connect cinema to sport and politics to finance. And they've been able to manage to reach out to all of these people. So today when they invited me, they said, Rishabh, why don't you speak about how to build network? And for me personally, how to speak about network is something very simple. I rarely carry this, but today the platform demands that, Rishabh, you stick to both time and also make some sense. So I'm carrying this with me. The thing about networking, you see, is something that you've always been doing all your life. It's not something that has come to you today. Networking is something that you've been doing as a child. And let me explain you how. Let me take you back to when you were 3 or 4 years of age and you wanted a chocolate. You didn't have any other way but to smile and convince your parents saying, I want that piece of chocolate. And that smile had to be endearing enough in order for the parent to say, yes, beta, this is your chocolate. You learned how to network before you learned how to speak. As you grew up, every time you copy in examinations, and I hope that you don't, every time you copy in examinations or do some mischief in school, and I was a notorious student, so every time there was any mischief in school, I had to somehow convince my teacher saying, look, this was the only one time that I was notorious, otherwise I was very disciplined. This required some sort of networking. Then you go on to become teenagers in life, and as a teenager, it's imperative in order to network with the cool kids. Because if you don't network with the cool kids, you won't be invited to the cool parties. And if you're not invited to the cool parties, then there's too much peer pressure. Now, this is still adolescence. But even after adolescence, from your first job till your last one, in order to get ahead in your life, you have little choice but to network with your peers, to network with your seniors. This is a school, and in a school, the teachers have to network with the principal as well. Otherwise, promotion kaise hoga? It's the reality of life that you need to network. If you do not network, you will not grow. Even when you are dying, at that juncture, you are networking. This time you're networking and you're praying, saying, God, please take me to a better life. But the issue is that networking, unfortunately, is something that we do only when it is necessary. Networking is something that we do when we are praying to Him, we are praying to the universe, saying, please give me a better life. This also happens a couple of times that we only network with Him when we need Him. Example, before the maths paper. Maths was never a strong subject, so I would always go and say, please, Bhagwan, ye paper sambhal lo. 2 extra nariyals I will donate. When India is playing Pakistan in the Cricket World Cup, we're all praying to the universe, saying, please make sure that anything happens, but India should win the World Cup. And that's not as important as India winning against Pakistan. We network only when we need something. And that, to me, is the problem. That, to me, is the main issue that one needs to solve. That how to network without a purpose. And I'm sure all of you understand the importance of networking. Because otherwise, how will you reach the top 1%? You will only reach the top 1% if you learn how to network with those who are in your ecosystem, who are running ecosystems, running the country, and then running the world. Again, my grandfather taught me this, saying, Rishabh, those with access will have a better chance at success. But those without access will try to do everything to reach success. And as somebody who was taught networking and never taught networking, I kind of had to figure it out myself. And there are a few things that have really helped me in my journey of trying to network and meet all of these people. And when we met all of these fancy, important, powerful people across the world, and when I'm expected to talk to you, I've studied accounts and finance as my formal education. And there were 3 golden rules of accounting. I'm sure some of you know them. But I never could remember the 3 golden rules of accounts. But I've today tried to list down the 3 golden rules for networking. So I hope you do a better job at remembering them than I did with accounts. But the first thing that I learned, and rather the hard way, was you network to learn and not to earn. You know, it's a transactional world. When we want the chocolate, we go to our parents. When we want the job, we go to the principal. When we want to go to a better place, we go to God. But we don't go despite that. And therefore, the biggest thing that I picked up was that it was imperative in order to try to build a library, but in this case, a human library. And another quote that always stuck by was that a conversation with a knowledgeable person is better than reading 100 books. And for somebody who was not a voracious reader, reading 100 books was a very difficult task. Therefore, learning from people was much easier. So slowly and gradually, I tried to build my human library. Human library, of course, is now a concept, but do try it. And when you try it, you'll kind of realize that people will teach you much more than books. And people will give you the best lessons of life. But the problem is, we don't reach out to people without a reason. We don't reach out to people to just learn. We always reach out to people to earn and not learn. So the first golden rule of networking that I would say is network to learn and not to earn. The second rule, per se, would be network by building quality and not quantity. That it's imperative that we, as people, do not try to build a vast number of people in our lives. And then, at the end of the day, we don't even remember a few. There are 90,000 faces that you will perhaps meet, 4 or 5,000 that you'll remember. And in my humble opinion, I don't think you'll remember more than 150, 200 birthdays. And if you don't remember more than 150 or 200 birthdays, then what's the point of those 5,000 Facebook friends? Or what's the point of those 20,000 Instagram followers when you're not actually networking with them? We have about 24 hours, 7 days, 365 days. We have 7 days, 24 hours, and a year comprises of 365 days, with an average lifespan of about 70 years. And relationships can only be formed after the first 5 years. Now, I already told you that my math is weak. But you multiply the number of hours that you have in your life and the number of people that you want to network with. You'd say, I want to perhaps aggregate everybody. I'd request you to only aggregate a few. And don't aggregate in order to earn. The first rule, and coming back to it, aggregate hopefully in order to learn. But we have friends, I'm sure both you and me, who basically make sure that they are friends with everyone else. Don't we have that one social butterfly who knows everybody? And I always wanted to be that one person saying, I should be invited everywhere and I should be with everybody. Later, I kind of realized it's impossible to be everywhere and with everybody. It's rather better to be somewhere and with somebody. So therefore, from my own personal experiences, I would say, build quality and not quantity. The third thing, in my humble opinion, the most important thing, is network with perseverance. And do not network with your ego. The thing is, as human beings, we love ourselves. And when somebody does not validate that for us, at that juncture, that person goes outside the network. The problem is, we need those people in our network. And ego, for me, has always been everlasting, gory overconfidence. That you're very overconfident about things that you should not be. So I'll use the story which I learned actually from my role model, Rahul Dravid. Perhaps you know him. And he told me this, and I've heard him say this. That there's a Chinese bamboo plant. A Chinese bamboo plant, for the first few years of nourishment. The first week, you plant a bamboo plant. For the first week, it does not grow. For the next few weeks, it will not grow. For the next few months, it will not grow. Even after a couple of years, it will not grow. It's only after 5 years that the Chinese bamboo plant suddenly grows up to a maximum of 90 feet. A lot of people will stop giving it the water and nourishment after the first few weeks. Very few people will be continuously giving it nourishment after 5 years. After 5 years, in a span of a short time, it grows to 90 feet. Some people will say it grew to 90 feet in a few weeks. I'd like to correct that and simply say that it took 5 years and a few weeks in order for it to grow to 90 feet. And that is the difference between networking with perseverance and networking without. A small thing which I must share from my own personal life is networking with perseverance with this one individual called Karan Johar. Perhaps you've heard of him as well. And Karan is somebody who was known to me by a lot of common mutual friends. In fact, my own girlfriend worked in the industry for a short while. And from the first year, I used to write to Karan, saying, Karan, can you please come for this event? I used to reach out to his assistants and say, can we please get Karan Johar to come to this event? Because for me, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai was a cult movie. Because for me, I grew up watching his movies, so I thought I must reach out to the man. It took me 1 year, and there was no response. The second year, and there was no response. We reached out to his personal aide again, no response. We went to his house, no response. We stood outside, literally outside Mannat, saying, please fulfill this Mannat. No response. After 3 years or 4 years, most of us would perhaps have given up. And most in my team back then said, Rishabh, you're stupid, just ask somebody to introduce you. Once you're introduced, I'm sure he'll see merit in it. But we persevered. I said, no, I want him to see it on merit. 3 years became 4, 4 became 6, 6 became 10. In 2011, I wrote the first message to him. And in 2020, he responded to the message. And in 2020, when he responded to the message, he responded and he said, are you stupid, Rishabh? You could have asked anybody in order to introduce me to you. And I told him this, and I keep telling him the same thing whenever I meet him. Had it been anybody else who would have introduced me to Karan and said, this is Rishabh and this is what he does, he would have perhaps taken that as sifarish, or the colloquial word, which basically means that coming from references. And he would have perhaps come once or twice. But he wouldn't necessarily see it on merit. It took 10 years in order to reach out to him. And on the 10th year, when I sent that message and he responded, and I met him for the first time, I realized that networking with perseverance will get you somewhere. Some people say that it's a foolish thing to do. Others say there was a wise thing to do. There was one Karan Johar that was then multiplied into a universe of cinema, into politics, into different walks of life. Today, from Mohan Bhagwat to Rahul Gandhi, and from Subramaniam Swamy to Pranab Mukherjee, from Karan Johar to different people across different walks of life like P.T. Usha, all come to the organization because they come without sifarish. They come without references. They come because you can network with perseverance. You should network without your ego. And you definitely must network only in order to learn and not earn. Unfortunately, I.I.M.U.N is a non-profit organization. Therefore, the network does not necessarily translate into net worth. But it is a network in itself. And today, that same network, just very recently, brought together people to talk about Manipur, an issue that people in Parliament did not speak about. I hope that this small little journey of networking has been something that would be useful to all of you. As my grandfather said, your network will be your net worth. Till date, it's not necessarily translated into net worth, but I'm not too worried about that. I hope you enjoyed the talk.